Dang it, Bobby.
Hey everybody, you're watching Bobby Revenue TV, and I'm your host, Bobby Revenue. Today we have a really special podcast. I'm going to be talking about some of the AI technologies and how they're influencing the music industry. And also, I'm going to talk about the writer's strike and how it kind of ties over into the music industry as well, like labor. And we're just going to deep dive into some, tips and tricks. And hopefully, it helps some artists or helps some producers out there, that just need some advice. So the first thing I want to talk about is the importance of fans to an artist's success. Because as an artist, we think like, oh, I'm just waiting for somebody to sign me so I can get on. I'm just waiting for that feature, waiting for that manager to see me performing at an open mic and want to and believe in me. But honestly, guys, it's really the fans that make an artist successful. Because think about it. Who's the ones who go buy your albums, right? Who's the ones who go to your shows? Who's the ones who stream your music? Usually it's not other artists or a manager or a DJ or even a label doing those things. It's the fans. So guys, the fans are the ones who give you notoriety. So focus on your fan base, building your fan base, interacting with your fans and having a positive dialogue with them. Because nobody wants to support somebody who's like mean and pessimistic and negative, like, oh, my fans don't believe in me, or oh, y'all fans don't share my stuff, y'all must not like my music like that, y'all sleeping on me. Like, no fan wants to support an artist that's acting like that. A fan wants to support an artist that is interacting with the fans and cares about them, cares what they like and don't like about this person's music, because you're trying to build super fans and people who are really invested in your story as an artist and your come up that want to see you succeed. Why would they want to see somebody succeed that they don't perceive as liking them, or somebody that's not very likable? So I'm not saying act fake or anything, or just always have a smile on your face. I'm just saying make sure the fans like you and you're likable to them. Like whatever demographic or niche market you're trying to infiltrate, make sure the people in that market like you. And people in different niches have different likes and things they like about artists, right? So maybe an ICP fan, Insane Clown Posse fan, might not like the same attributes as like a Eminem fan, for instance, right? So you just have to think about that. Care about your fans. Start a dialogue with them. Communicate with them in the comment section. Do giveaways. Just things to show your fans that you appreciate them. Because it's all like, it's like a cycle. Because it's all like one fan, one more fan. Like it's building gradually to where then you have a fan base. So just gradually build up your fan base and scale it. And to do that, you need to be likable. That's all I'm saying. So yeah, artists, pay attention to your fans. It's not the labels or the managers that's going to make you rich. It's the fans. Let's be real here. I know I keep saying that, but it's true. So recently, one of my friends, Queso Bobby, he posted this video on Instagram, or I think his cameraman, Nick, actually posted it. And he's basically talking about how Spotify and Apple Music have a monopoly on the music industry right now. And also how streaming pays so little to the artist and has taken away a lot of the revenue from music. And I kind of see where he's coming with that. And I can see both sides because I've actually been trying to start a streaming company. You know what I'm saying? So I'm the guy that wants to be a Spotify. But then I'm also an artist too, because I rap, I have an album out, I'm a producer. So I'm on both sides of this coin. And my opinion on this is really, yes, the streaming services have to pay out better to the artist. Like I think it's like 0.0003 of a penny per stream. Like it's so minuscule. Like it's hard to even grasp how much money you're making because the fractions are so small. Like what's a 0.003 of a penny, right? So, and also the thing is, like with streaming companies, they have to pay out all these artists for their streams, right? And it becomes very expensive, every month if they're sending out the royalties for this, for these artist streams every month. It becomes very expensive, and the streaming platforms, their way of getting money is by charging for a membership, right? $9.99. I think Spotify's membership's going up to $10.99, right? $11. So out of those $11 a month times however many subscribers the streaming company has, they have to pay that money back out for the licenses and for the streaming numbers that is generated in that month, right? So I think it's such a big problem because the scale of all this. There's literally millions of artists, I think, out on Spotify right now. So to be able to pay out all that money every month to these millions of artists, and then you want to upgrade the pay, like you want to make a stream even cost even more money that the Spotify or the streaming service has to pay out to the artist. It's like, how are they going to be profitable or be able to pay out those streaming royalties every month, right? So I think the answer to that for the streaming companies is cryptocurrency. Because with cryptocurrency, you could invent your own cryptocurrency and pay people their royalties in that. And then they can just exchange the cryptocurrency for money, right? So, and with crypto, you can make however many coins you want. It just has to be backed by a certain amount of liquidity. And I think that Spotify and these other streaming companies could use part of the monthly subscriber revenue they get to feed into the Bitcoin or the cryptocurrency for the streaming service pool, so it actually has value, right? That I think might be a great way to do it. And I've actually heard of streaming services that do pay in cryptocurrency. I think one of them is Audius, Audis, and I actually have one of my instrumental albums up on Audius, and it's been getting some plays and stuff. I think Audius has a good idea, and they're on the right track. But there's it's a very small streaming service still. They don't have much of a market share compared to like a Spotify or say Apple Music, right? Or a Tidal even. So if we could get Spotify or Apple Music to create their own cryptocurrency and use that to pay artists, then you could just create more coins, create more cryptocurrency to be able to pay artists, because you wouldn't have a ceiling based on the Spotify is paying people in money, dollars. So there's a ceiling. There's only a certain amount of money they can put out every month for streaming royalties, right? But if they had their own cryptocurrency, then that ceiling could be however big as many coins as they've created, right? So that's all I'm saying. I think cryptocurrency is the answer for music, at least, because it's going to help bring up the compensation while still keeping the cost of actually paying the artists to the streaming services so they can remain profitable and in business. You know, everybody wins. So that's just my thought on this issue. And yes, Spotify, Apple Music, they do have a monopoly on music right now because it's a practical monopoly. Why would I spend $20 on one album when I can go spend $10.99 for Spotify and get all the albums in the world and new albums that come out also? Of course I'm not gonna go buy the record if I could just stream it on Spotify for $10.99 a month. It's just simple. That's just people. And I think the music business, we have to adapt to new changes and adapt to the changing landscape of entertainment business right now. It's streaming for movies and music. I'm going to get into where those two parts intersect later on in this conversation as well. So just stay tuned. Now that we've talked about the artist and the streaming platforms, let's talk about how the labels fit into all of this. Now, what you got to understand is when Spotify and these streaming services were created, like Tidal, the labels actually bought shares of streaming companies, right? They bought shares into these companies. And what did they give the streaming companies in return for these shares in Spotify, right? Is what they gave the labels. They made licensing deals with all the streaming platforms where they gave the streaming platforms incredible leverage and let them basically set really low payouts for the artist's music without consulting the artist. These labels that made these deals with Spotify didn't ask the artist, hey, what do you think about us letting Spotify stream your song for 0.0003 of a cent? What do you think about that? Do you think it should be more? There was none of that. It was all just a unilateral move so that the labels could get in on Spotify and invest in it early before streaming became a big thing, because they knew the future of music. The labels had learned about the past mistakes of the music industry. So they didn't want to repeat history. And they ended up basically selling out their artists so that the labels could get a higher position in Spotify and other streaming services. They sold us out so that our payouts aren't as big, but they still win, because the bigger Spotify gets means the bigger, more money the label's investment is. Like, if the company becomes like 100 or 200 or $300 billion company, their percentage of stock that they own becomes worth more. So they're making more money, and their investment they're getting an ROI on their investment. But at the same time, the artists are still getting so little of a payout for the music, while the labels are still winning. So of course they're not going to go to Spotify and try to change the rules, because at the end of the day, it still benefits the labels. It does. So we got to just realize that and know, like, the cards have already been stacked against us when this stuff was created. This was at the genesis of Spotify. This happened. And I really don't know what's the solution to this, but I think it's going to take some really smart people and some really powerful people to make a difference in the music industry and the entertainment business as a whole, because this is definitely a monopoly, because it feels like about three or four companies own basically the whole entertainment music business, basically. Like, nobody buys albums anymore like that. Let's just be real. And even these streaming companies like Apple Music, they also sell albums too. So they're in it. They're still in the game also, not just streaming, but they're also selling the albums as an online retailer. So you just got to think about that. So next, I want to talk about how the actor strike and the writer's strike is kind of similar to what's going on in the music industry right now. Basically, the actors and the writers, they're fighting AI, replacing them, because AI has gotten so powerful now, it can write scripts. It can generate images of people. Like, soon it's going to be able to create like whole TV shows and write whole scripts for movies and everything, all based on AI, without having to hire a writer, without having to hire an actor. So some of the similarities I see between the actors' strike and the writer's strike and the music industry itself is it really goes all back to the big businesses and the studios that are controlling it and paying us. So I'm going to give y'all some game. Most record label contracts are only for like 12, and if you lucky, up to 20% of your revenue. That's like a Michael Jackson deal, right? So you're only making 14 to 20% of the actual, like, the sale of your record, right? And now they're diluting it even more because people don't buy CDs no more. They just stream it, right? So that's what the movie industry is having with streaming as well. They're fighting streaming and artificial intelligence because nobody's going to see movies anymore. They're just going streaming it on Hulu or Netflix or whatever streaming platform they use. So it's the same thing with the music industry. The old way of consuming the media, where the artist can get paid a percentage, is like outdated now because people don't consume media the same way. So the old contracts and way of compensating artists and the old contracts and way of compensating actors and writers doesn't really apply to the same landscape, because there's no money really in movie theaters or any money in buying physical albums or CDs anymore. It's all streaming. So now the Writers Guild and the Actors Guild, they want a contract that gives them royalties and back ends on the streaming viewer numbers of these shows and these movies that they're writing or that the actors are in. And I would hope maybe someday the musicians wake up and realize, like, wow, we should do that maybe with Spotify and the streaming companies. Like, we should try to get a share of their subscribership revenue, because nobody's going on Spotify if it doesn't have the albums I like or the music I want to listen to. The only reason these services have millions of users and a huge user base is because of the content and the art we put on there for free. We sell ourselves out so that we can get on Spotify, we can get on YouTube. We're giving these platforms content that they would not exist without us. And the same thing goes for the movie industry. Netflix would have nothing if they didn't have movies and TV shows for people to sign up for the membership and go watch. So we just want a fair and equal deal. And these contracts are so old and draconian. Like they're all based from like the 90s to the mid 2000s, these entertainment contracts, and they don't account for streaming or the modern era of how people consume media now. So you can't expect the people to want to be held to the same terms that we were doing in the 90s and the early 2000s because Spotify and Netflix weren't around. Okay? So they just want to update the contracts and the terms, and the movie studios and the streaming services and Spotify and iTunes or Apple Music, like all these people are pushing back on that because that means more money they're going to have to pay out to creators and less money they keep for themselves. That's it. It's simple. It's all goes back to the money problem, right? And I also understand the writers and actors like apprehensiveness or wanting to be able to control AI's involvement in the entertainment business, because even now in music, we're having that same problem where, they have plugins and websites and music platforms that can generate whole songs. They could generate melodies. They can generate lyrics. Like, it's like, why would you need to pay a producer for a beat or go have them produce something for you when you can just click a button and boom, you have the beat that you always wanted at your fingertips, and it was created by AI, so you don't have to pay, some producer to use his music. And it even goes to singers as well. So now they have AI where you can type in lyrics and you can download an MP3 of a voice singing it, and it's a computer voice singing it. It's not an actual singer. It's the AI. And that could have a grave effect on the singing industry as well. Like, why would I need to get a feature from this huge rapper when I can just use the AI of his voice and type some lyrics up, and then boom, I have him on my song and I didn't have to pay for a feature. And so yeah, AI has become almost like crypto was back in the 2020, 2021, when it was still unregulated. Like now they've started putting regulations and taxes and all that on crypto to try to regulate it and rein it in. But now we have AI and the laws are still trying to catch up to it. And it's like, how do we approach this? Do we outlaw AI in movies and use in music? Do we have to change our copyright laws? If I use an AI of some famous rapper's voice, do I have to pay them now because I used the artificial intelligent version of their voice? Like, is that copyright infringement if I use the AI version of their voice? So the laws in our government have to catch up to this huge revolution we're having in AI right now. And the Actors Guild, the Writers Guild, and musicians are all still trying to figure out how much do we rein in and regulate and control this AI before it replaces everybody. Okay? That's just the situation we're in right now. My last point I want to make is let's take it back in the music industry to the early 2000s when Napster came out, right? The labels tried and the artists tried to fight Napster. Like, I think there was a famous case of Metallica suing Napster for sharing tracks from their albums on the platform. And actually, the labels and the artists ended up on the wrong side of history in that one, because it looked bad when you had this huge label suing, a mom and a dad for downloading an album off of Napster. And it looked bad in the press. And actually, the music business and the artists backed off when they had all this bad press and public pushback from it, right? But that's because the artists and the labels didn't know how to use Napster and embrace it. Instead, they tried to fight new technology and fight change. And if you know anything about technology, when you fight change or fight technology or the new way of doing things, it usually doesn't end well. And that thing either ends up becoming even bigger, or it just makes you look like old and like out of date and out of times, right? So I feel like with the music industry, they did a decent job at doing it when Spotify and them came out, because if you think about it, the labels didn't try to take down Spotify or Apple Music. They actually embraced it and made licensing deals with them and invested in their stock. And if the music industry had did that with Napster, they probably could have controlled Napster, and like it wouldn't have became this out of control file downloading for free, getting free music for free thing. But now the labels learned from their mistakes with Napster, and they hurried up and invested in Spotify to try to get in ahead of the curve and be on the right side of history. So I think also with artificial intelligence, we should do that as well. We should embrace it. We should figure out how to use it to make creation even faster and easier and more streamlined. Because what's wrong with that? It's just a technology thing, right? Like, think about it. People weren't saying, oh, you're cheating using MIDI. When MIDI came around in the 80s, you're not manually syncing up the keyboards yourself. You're connecting them through MIDI when that technology was invented, MIDI. Then why are we so hostile towards AI? Some of us like, oh, it's not real music. It's just computer generated notes and melodies. Like, it's still a tool. And AI, you have to tell it what you want it to create. So it's basically taking producers back from the whole playing all the instruments, playing all the parts themselves, to more of like a Quincy Jones or like a conductor type of role for producers, like some of the producers in the 50s. Like, they didn't necessarily play the instruments or pick the instruments up themselves. They had session musicians to do that, but they told them what they wanted them to play and how they wanted it to sound. So that didn't make them any less of a producer. Like, you know, Quincy Jones still did Thriller, but I'm pretty sure he didn't play any of the instruments on Thriller, but he's still the producer of Thriller by Michael Jackson, right? One of probably the best-selling album of all time. So as producers using AI, we're just telling the computer what we have in our head, what we want it to create. And it does that for us. The AI is almost like our own personal session musicians, but it's not a person picking up the guitar and playing the chords, or somebody sitting down at the piano and playing the notes. It's the AI doing it. But you still had to tell it with a text prompt what you wanted it to sound like. So I'm just saying, let's embrace AI in music. Let's not be afraid of it, because we don't want to just be stuck in our ways or stuck in an old way of thinking when we have this whole new possibility for music and AI now. Like, anything is on the table now. If you can dream it in your mind, you can get AI to create the sound. It doesn't matter how much music theory you know, or how many chords you know, or how long you got to sit at the computer sound designing patches and synths and sounds. Now the computer can do all that for you in a matter of seconds. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I just think we have to know how to use it and embrace it, not to replace people or replace jobs, but to make the creativity process even faster. Like, think about it. Now you can do demos of songs without having to have somebody sing it. I can just plug the lyrics into an AI voice generator and have the AI voice singer sing the whole song for me. And I can make whole demos of songs so I can give them to a real artist to say, here's what I want you to sing and how I want it to sound. And then when they ask who sung on the demo, you can say AI. So it doesn't have to be a tool to replace people. It's just the context and how you use it. Thank you, everybody, for watching Bobby Revenue TV. I'm your host, Bobby Revenue, and have a good day.